You're listening to audio from the Decidedly podcast. For more information, find us on Instagram at Decidedly Podcast.
I'm feeling good today.
Yeah.
I went to jiu-jitsu on my lunch break.
You're dedicated.
Right before this recording. I love to do it. Fridays are my favorite because I get to wake up super early, start work at 6:30. I'm going to go to jiu-jitsu at 12, and then I'll do some work after that. So I love it. And I was talking with my friend Austin Powers.
That can't be a real name.
It's his real name. His real name. We call him AP in the gym because it's...
Does he dress like he's from the 70s?
No, he doesn't, but he does have a tattoo of Austin Powers, the character, on his arm. You kind of got to, right?
You almost have to. All right, yeah.
I mean, if my name was Shrek, I'd do that, lean into it. And he was talking with me about preparing for a fight that he has. He has an MMA fight next Friday in Arlington. And he was saying, I got to be careful about who my training partners are right now because I'm trying to up the intensity. Like I don't want to train with people who aren't going to help me prepare for this fight because it's going to be a real fight. It's not,
right.
Not, we're not playing around. And
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he says, some people, I can't mess with them, man. I can't train with them because they want to play around. They're goofing around. They don't want to go hard. They don't want to be intense. Like I'm not about that. And he goes, you helped me out a lot. And he goes, I said, why?
Oh, nice.
I was like, well, I don't fight. I just do jujitsu.
Right.
I'm not trying to get punched in the face.
Of course.
And he says, well, because you are an asshole.
Do you hear that a lot?
It's a great compliment. And he goes, you're an asshole. I said, oh man, okay. So why? He goes, because you were just so mean to me when I started. And I was like, you're damn right.
Are you?
You're damn right. I'm
mean.
Of course. I'm not. Here's the thing. You come into this training environment where it's a combat sport. Okay. We are doing combat. We are not training golf. We are not training tennis. We are training to fight. So I can't train any other way than full speed. Because a fight is not going to be half speed. A fight's not going to be playful. A fight's going to be real. So when we're training, there is a high degree of trust between training partners that has to be there that you can't understand if you haven't done it, right? If I'm training, this guy who I'm training with might put his arms around my neck and squeeze until the blood gets cut off to my brain. He might twist my arm behind my back until my bones are about ready to pop. And if I tap on him, just a light tap, 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 I trust that he's going to let go. There's not a referee when we're training. There's not anybody watching half the time. So I've got to trust this person a lot. And so do they have to trust me that I'm not going to rip their knee and tear their ACL, that I'm not going to intentionally try to hurt them. And so for me to come in and I don't know this person who I'm training with, I'm not going to let them get into a position that's advantageous when they haven't built that trust up with me to where I know they're not going to hurt me. I'm going to protect myself just like I would protect myself if I'm in a real fight. Now, I'm not going to be dirty. I'm not going to try to hurt them, but I'm going to be very on my P's and Q's to make sure that I'm safe. Now, after a while, if I know somebody and we've built up rapport and we've been training together for a year or two or more, and I know them and we're friends, yeah, maybe I'll be playful. Maybe I'll smack talk a little bit while we're training to be funny. Maybe I can be a little bit more relaxed, still train with intensity. So when I first met AP, we're training, we're hardcore going at it. And I'm not letting him do things that don't work. I'm not going to do things that don't work on him. I'm not going to try technique that's lazy or ineffective just because it's fun. No, I'm going to really, really go at it with him. And I used to try to beat him up all the time. And now, guess what? He'll beat me up sometimes. Yeah. Good. He goes, yeah, man, you helped me out. You made it tough on me. You made it hard on me. And I appreciate that. And I took that as a very big compliment. I thought of that today because I was taking this Enneagram test. I had never taken an Enneagram test. Enneagram, personality assessment. I'm taking the test and I'm looking at the questions, and a good number of the questions made me feel so uncomfortable because they were like, I often make people feel welcome.
You're like, never.
And I was like, never. Clearly not after this conversation am I going to sit here and say I make people feel welcome, or I go out of my way to make people feel included. I was like, dang, I don't do that. But I don't like that about myself. I don't like that I don't make people feel welcome, but I'm recognized, especially when faced with the question, I don't do that.
Right.
And for a second I was down on myself. I said, geez, man, that's not good. Maybe I could work on that. At the same time, in very specific contexts, not in general broadly, but in some contexts, like a gym where we're learning to fight. Yeah, you know what? I don't want to make you feel welcome.
You're getting some positive reinforcement.
I want you to feel unwelcome when you're trying to fight my ass.
Was this a conscious decision to be less welcoming, or do you think that was just your natural tendency coming out?
It's a conscious decision. If I catch you off the mat in the locker room, I'll be like, hey, what's up?
Yeah.
But if I don't know you, I don't even know your first name,
yeah.
and you come and we're trying to roll and you're playing and joking around,
yeah,
or you're trying some whack technique on me, you're just doing some goofy stuff,
mm-hmm.
or maybe you're flailing too much because you don't really know your technique and your ego is showing. You're trying to kick my butt when you've been training 6 days and you don't know anything.
Right.
I'm going to be very unwelcoming because you're either going to not show up or you're going to learn and you're going to get good. And that's what he did. He's very good now, and he's going to go out there and he's going to kick some guy's ass on next Friday. And I'm going to be very happy in the stands cheering him on. So, I mean, I'm just some guy at this gym. I don't know anything, but I'm not going to be put in a position to have some Yahoo walk off the street and tear my knee up in half because I let him get in a position.
Yeah. Okay.
I
get it.
Or I let him twist my arm behind my back just because,
you don't want to be rude.
I don't know. I don't trust you.
Because you don't want to be rude.
Yeah, because I don't want to be rude. I want to make him feel like he's doing good. Nope. I'll let you feel like you're doing good somewhere else. So I learned a lot about myself doing that Enneagram test. I learned a whole heck of a lot more talking to our guest, Tyler Zock. He's a certified Enneagram coach, a pastor, author, and co-founder of One Hope Church in Omaha. He trains business teams to grow in self-knowledge, empathy, and productivity using the Enneagram. You can find him on Instagram at Gospel for Enneagram, and you can find his book on book series on individual Enneagram types on his website, gospelforenneagram.com, where he tailors the message of the gospel based on your unique Enneagram type. We talked about the history and the origination of the Enneagram, values versus virtues, and challenging the weaknesses of your type, leaning into the strengths. I learned a heck of a lot, was forced to be self-reflective, and I know that you are going to learn something too. My name's Sanger Smith. As always, I'm with my dad, Sean Smith, and this is Decidedly. Tyler, glad you're here.
Sean.
Hey, how's it going?
Well,
Good.
He's Sean, I'm Sanger, but that's okay.
Oh,
did Morgan tell you
I've been called a lot?
looking?
I've been called a lot worse.
Oh, I bet.
great to meet you guys, and I'm excited to be on the show. Thanks for inviting me on.
I'm glad you're here. I'm not glad that I took the Enneagram test because it was super self-reflective and uncomfortable.
It is.
And I'm sitting there answering these questions, and it's like I relentlessly defend the people I love and care about. I'm like, oh, geez, well, relentlessly. And then it's like, I will go out of my way. No one can stop me from giving back to others. I'm like, well, I don't know. Some people could probably stop me. And then it's like, I'll do anything to, give to charity and do all the good things in this world. I'm like, God, man, it's not just like a little bit. There's people out here that are really dying on this hill.
I think you were saying that you felt like it was uncomfortably self-reflective, so you didn't like that at all. And I had to sit here next to him as he tried to wrestle through and explain and rationalize each answer. He goes, well, I care about people, but do I care about them relentlessly?
Yeah, it's like, God, all these adjectives making it hard, Tyler.
So, hey, Tyler, I want to go back to how you got into being interested in Enneagram.
Yeah, well, I saw a friend using it, and it looked kind of like a pentagram. It looked a little suspicious, you know. I did some research on it and looked into it, and I did the same thing as Sanger. I took a test, and immediately, as I started to get into it, started to feel like somebody was, reading my mail. And
yes,
through that process, started to continue to get into it and really found it highly encouraging and affirming, but also extremely challenging, more challenging than the Myers-Briggs or StrengthsFinder. And so the Enneagram really gets at your motivations behind, what you do. And so it's very deep. Sometimes it takes a little while for you to find your type because it is looking at those inner motivations. And sometimes we're not aware of why we do what we do. Which is super important to the topic of decision making, which we'll be talking about today, because the inner motivations affect decision making, and oftentimes it's like a software running in the background that you can't see.
So when you looked at that, you said you felt like it was sort of like a pentagram. I mean, did you begin to research that and look at the background of where it came from?
I did a deep dive, and I'm actually coming out with an e-course on the origins and history of the Enneagram, because I think that's important. Some people say it's an ancient tool. I don't believe it is an ancient tool. It's really a product of the 1960s, created by a guy named Oscar Ichazo. And so he was overlying personality insights. He was a psychologist, overlying personality insights during the same time Freud was sort of doing his work. And he overlaid it onto a 9-point symbol, which is where we get the name Enneagram. Enneagram just means a 9-point diagram. So it really is not an ancient tool, but really was developed in the 1960s.
Why do people think it's an ancient tool if that's not true?
Because some of the Enneagram is pulling from ancient sources. And so some people think it's Christian because of a guy named Raymond Lowell and others who developed some vices and virtues. The Enneagram also has like the 7 deadly sins plus 2 to get to 9 overlaid on each of the types. So there's some ancient things that are overlaid onto the modern Enneagram. But from my research, it was not something that was developed centuries ago that's been inherited and passed down through the ages.
Yeah, a lot of that stuff, they talk about things that are, coming from the ancient, but I guess everything comes from the ancient. If you
There's
trace
no
it
new
from
ideas.
back yeah,
There's no new ideas anymore.
having a 9-point diagram doesn't make
the shape is certainly ancient. Well, we'll give them that one.
Circle with a square and triangle.
So some people think it's Christian. Some people thought it was pagan, cultic, satanic, and
Yeah, exactly.
So I had read that it was a guy named George Gurdjieff back in the 1900s or so, 1916 or something like that.
He came up with the symbol, but there's a lot of confusion around the symbol. The symbol was designed by him to interpret all of life. It was kind of like, how, in leadership programs, we use the triangle and we can overlay all kinds of, 3 different ideas onto it to be comprehensive. And, we can use shapes to illustrate things. He was taking the Enneagram and using it as a way to understand all of life. And so he put the musical octaves around the diagram and a whole lot of other things. But it was not a personality tool. He had the closest it became a personality tool for him was that he put a chief feature on all the 9 points. One was like, a person who acts like an idiot, someone who is a compulsive liar. It was very negative. That's the closest he got to, a personality tool. But it was really Ichazo that the one that applied his personality insights to that Gurdjieff's diagram and turned it into a personality tool. But even Ichazo didn't believe that you were one of those numbers or one of those points. It was Naranjo who learned it from Echazo. Naranjo was a Chilean who studied in Ivy League schools in America and was at some of the leading institutions in America learning about personality in the 1960s and 70s. And Naranjo is the one that came up with the Ennea types that said you could be a type 1, a type 2, a type 3. And so he's really the one that developed it into a personality tool. And then the Jesuits, a couple of the Jesuits learned it from Naranjo, and then they went and taught it to the school at Loyola, and a lot of the Jesuits got a hold of it, and then from there it just became publicized. And then, in the 90s, the Stanford Graduate School of Business launched its first course on the Enneagram called Personality, Self-Awareness, and Leadership. And then, the U.S. Postal Service has used it. The Vatican has used it. Chick-fil-A has used it with their corporate exec team. The CAA, I've heard, has used it to understand the personality of terrorists. So a lot of people have picked up and have been using it.
So do you think the split between Naranjo and then some members of the church using it, do you think that's where that belief sort of began to start, with some people saying it was satanic, some people saying no, it's based on Christianity? Are they looking back to that division there?
There's some questionable things that Echazo and Naranjo said that made people think that it came from spirits or demons, and so that's sort of the conversation, that's good to be had to figure that out. So Oscar Echazo, they said, received it from an archangel named Metatron, which sounds like a transformer, but he actually came out in a letter that I found, and he's denied it. Said, no, I don't know where that rumor came from, but I did not get it from an archangel or any sort of thing like that. Naranjo later on claimed that he got it through automatic writing, that he got the Ennea types from automatic writing, which is sort of a new age way of sort of channeling your inner conscience, like channeling things from within and writing it down on paper. And some automatic
is that sort of like a free flow? So if I'm just sort of getting into a different consciousness and I'm just writing what comes to mind, right? Or letting the spirit come through me, or a spirit come through me. Is that make it satanic? Does the church see that as a bad form of expression or creativity?
Yep. The churches and other Christians have taken that one line that was off the cuff from Naranjo in a June 2010 interview on YouTube. They've taken that and sort of twisted it and distorted it. Because one, he never said that he got it from a demon or spirits. So that's one, thing there that's important to know. We don't know what he meant by automatic writing. It's much more likely that, he sat down and through meditative practice, got out on paper what was already inside. And the curious thing is he never said that and never claimed that until 40 years after teaching the Enneagram. So it was off the cuff in one interview. It was decades after he had taught it. No, he had never told anybody that before. And so even Enneagram experts like Beatrice Chestnut, who's not a Christian, says that she doesn't believe that he got it from spirits, and thinks that he was just kind of making a kind of a smart comment off the cuff. But all the evidence points to the fact that he didn't get it just out of thin air, but that he got it from his extensive research. I mean, he was a medical doctor, and he was he studied personality in Ivy League schools in America. So it's hard to believe that he would have got it out of thin air from, a spirit. Much more likely.
I don't really understand the mindset of some Christians who make such an effort to avoid everything that they deem pagan or satanic. Christmas trees are pagan and Halloween's pagan and everything is pagan.
Monster drink.
Yeah, monster. Oh, have you seen that video? I have
seen that video.
Oh man.
Harry Potter books.
Harry
Potter books are pagan and everything's
the peace sign. I heard the peace sign was a broken cross.
Oh gosh. Yeah. What do we believe? What do we believe about God? What do we believe about God if if all of these things are so evil and need to be avoided. And, I think that puts God in a really weakened state and viewpoint to say, oh, I'm serving this all powerful, omniscient God. But if I have a Christmas tree in my house, he ain't gonna be able to help me anymore.
They're sneaking in with Halloween on me.
Come on, guys. Give our guy some credit.
J.K. Rowling said that she's never met a kid who has read the Harry Potter books that turned into a witch or practiced witchcraft.
Unfortunately. I was trying so hard when those books were out. I mean, I almost ran into a brick wall at a train station to try to get, it's like,
to see if it worked.
If I believe hard enough, man, I can start Wingardium Leviosa in some people. It didn't work.
So I'm kind of with you. Sometimes there are those that are over the top on just sort of criticizing stuff. Yeah. And I think you want to look at things on their face value. Is this a tool that gives me the ability to assess tendencies or personality tendencies, or
we should be judging the outcome, not necessarily the motive for the creation of whatever it is that we're deeming to be pagan, right? I mean, what's the outcome? What's the worst possible thing that's going to happen about me understanding personalities a little bit better?
Right. Yeah.
The outcome. Now, if the outcome is bad, then maybe you can also point to the origin and say, well, hey, the origin is pagan and the outcome's not good. So we're 0 for 2 here. You should probably avoid that. And I'm going to listen to that. If you say, well, the outcome's fine, I got no problem with the outcome, but the origin's awful and evil. Well, right. Now I'm not so convinced.
Yeah.
So what the Enneagram, for people that don't know now, how is it used today?
Yeah. Well, Naranjo he thought the Enneagram, it was not some sort of holistic religious worldview that he was pushing on people. He thought of it as a tool, and he was grateful that psychologists could use it, therapists could use it in their practice. He was happy that the Jesuits were using it in their religious worldview. He was just happy that other people were using it. And so what's really helpful about the Enneagram is that, again, it gets at your core desires, your core fears, those types of things that aren't so on the surface. And once you start to understand why you do what you do and why other people do what they do, it can on a team, on a business team, it can lead to greater unity, greater empathy towards one another, and really greater productivity as you understand your strengths and your weaknesses.
So it's a tool to understand the personality differences that each of us are uniquely blessed with or cursed with.
Well, I think, isn't it based a lot on what are these different personality types or characteristics? What do they fear? What are their motivations? In other words, what's sort of driving these different personalities? And they happen to divide it into 9. Okay, there you go. You could quibble on that, whether it ought to be 5 or 12 or whatever. I guess it doesn't matter. But if there's some truth in that, and there's something you can learn from how you tend to strive to avoid certain things or engage with certain things based on this characteristic, I think that's probably helpful.
Very helpful. And think of the paint swatch or all the paint colors in Home Depot. You have your primary colors, and then you have a lot of different colors that you can mix to create different shades and hues. And so the Enneagram doesn't say that God or just people, that only happens to be 9 types of people. The 9 actually can be broken down into 27 types, and you can keep creating different colors and shades and hues. But the Enneagram is a good start at looking at 9 different archetypes based on core fears, core desires, and core sins, if you will, things that we need to spend more time thinking about than other people. So for me as a type 3, I can be very image conscious and think too much about my image, how I look. I can bend the truth or be deceitful. I can see patterns of deceit in my past of kind of bending the truth in order to look good, and that informs my decision making. As I make decisions, image is always right there. It's almost like a glasses that you put on, and you see a lens that you see things through. And so different, the Enneagram helps us to see which lens we're seeing all of life through, and to try on other people's lenses to see how they are viewing what we're doing in the workplace, and how they're coming at it.
I love that you talk about the core sins that we can be more inclined to fall into based on our personality types. I think there's definitely a wave in modern society of self-worship and, do what feels right, be yourself, whatever you the self are the arbiter of what's good. And that's very, very dangerous, right? And it impacts our decision making, because if whatever feels right to me and whatever I am kind of inclined to do is what's good, then I'm going to do a lot of bad things. And now a lot of people, they hear that and they think, well, okay, so Sanger's talking about drinking if you really want to drink, right? Or doing drugs if you really want to do drugs, or doing these things that we already know are bad just because the self is telling me to do it. That's part of it, but it's also what you talked about, right? Image conscious, being too overtly image conscious isn't something that is necessarily, that's not something that even I don't think the majority of people would say is an obvious bad, right? There's some benefits to caring about my image. Not caring at all is no good, but caring too much is vanity, right? And so where's the line? But if I have this natural inclination as a 3 like you to be image conscious, then maybe I'm going to fall into vanity a little bit too much. Or maybe I'm going to fall into deceit to protect an image. And that isn't what our modern society is telling us to do. That isn't focusing on our values. That's not focusing on our values. Or maybe it is focusing on values, but it's certainly not focusing on our virtues, right? What virtues are important to us? And we should promote and focus on the virtues that we want to emulate most closely, not just the feelings that we have that we want to emulate most closely, or the perceived values that we want to emulate.
The virtue for a type 3 like myself is truthfulness. So to become less deceitful, less bending the truth, less shape shifting to present the image that I think other people want to see, and to be direct and truthful, to be fully authentic. And that's not very hard for a type 8. A type 8 is almost too truthful. They are truthful, direct, honest, blunt, and will oftentimes hurt people with their words when they're unhealthy. So that's just to show you the contrast between how the Enneagram can help us to pinpoint like which virtue we need to spend more time cultivating, and our weaknesses as well.
So I want to get your opinion on this, Tyler. I think we focus a lot as a culture on the pursuit of values. And I'm not sure where the line is between values that are, self-originating. Like I just really like this thing, right? Like I've seen people say, well, pleasure is a value of mine. And I go, ooh, is it? Like, I'm hesitant to tell you that your values are wrong. And maybe it is something that is important to you. It's certainly not a virtue. It's certainly not a virtue. But truthfulness or honesty, that could be both a value and a virtue. So how do we differentiate? Obviously there's a biblical answer to that question, but what's maybe a more, I don't know. What's your take on where I'm going here?
I would even say, I think fun is a virtue. Pleasure, can be a virtue. I think, we want our kids to experience pleasure, joy, fun, and actually worked with another pastor who wanted fun to be the core value on our team. And another pastor did not, Yeah. And a lot of churches would look at fun as not a virtue, something that we shouldn't have to consider or work on in the church world. But we all know overly serious church cultures, church leaders. And so I love that my friend, who is a type 7 on the Enneagram, and sevens have a high need for fun and pleasure and joy, to lighten things up, to add humor into the workplace, to make it not so stuffy, but enjoyable. And so I think it's helpful to know that, and to actually rely on other people and the virtues that they just kind of naturally kind of ooze out of them, and to bring that into the workplace and value all those different lenses and virtues that people are bringing.
So give me a quick rundown kind of there's 9 different types there.
Yep.
What would you say is the overriding motivation characteristic in each one of these? What drives each one of these characteristics?
I can give them in a very quick nutshell, and then we can come back around if you want later to talk about
let's do that.
How the decision-making lens that they put on. So type 1s are called the improvers or perfectionists. And so they fear being bad or imperfect. They desire that which is morally good and right. They focus on what needs improving, and they avoid making mistakes at all costs. Type 2s are the helpers or befrienders. They fear being personally rejected. They fear being useless. They have a need to be needed. They have a desire to be loved and wanted. They focus on the needs of others, not their own needs. So they oftentimes avoid their own needs and desires because they're always thinking about other people. Type 3s are the achievers and performers. They fear failing. They fear being worthless, and oftentimes their work and their achievements give them worth externally. Their desires for success and admiration. They focus on image, like I talked about before, and goals to help them be successful. And they avoid failure at all costs and inefficiency. Type 4s are the hardest to wrap your mind around. Oftentimes they're the artists or therapists among us. They're called the individualists or romantics. They fear being flawed or inadequate. Oftentimes they feel like they were born with manufacturer defects, like there's just something missing. They're not whole. They desire to be unique and special. They focus on what's missing, and they avoid the common, ordinary, and the mundane. So type 5s are the investigators and observers. So they fear being ignorant. They want to know their stuff. They don't like being invaded or intruded upon because they want to protect their personal space and energy. They desire to be capable and competent. They focus on accumulating knowledge, and they avoid being uninformed or, like I said, intruded upon. Type 6s, this is my wife. They are the loyalists, or sometimes called the devil's advocate. So they have a fear of being without support and guidance. They desire safety and security above all. They focus on what could go wrong. So they're great risk assessors, and they avoid uncertainty and vulnerability. And then type 7s, we talked a little bit about these guys. They're the enthusiasts. So they fear being deprived or trapped. They desire happiness and satisfaction. They focus on what's next. They're always planning the next fun adventure, the next fun thing. And they avoid pain and suffering at all costs. The type 8s are the challengers, the defenders. They fear being weak or controlled. Sometimes you're an 8 if you just hate being controlled by other people and try to avoid it like the plague. Their desires for power, protection, and influence. They focus on taking charge. They don't really like falling in line, but taking charge. And they avoid looking weak or being vulnerable. And then the type 9s are the peacemakers and mediators. They fear being in conflict. They don't like their peaceful life disrupted, and they fear being invisible, overlooked by others. Their desires peace and harmony. They focus on the expectations of others. So I'm just going to do my job and do what's expected of me so I can maintain peace and harmony. And they avoid conflict at all costs, and they avoid discomfort. They like living a comfortable, peaceful life. And so that is a quick overview of all the types.
Wouldn't you agree that the number 3 is the best one?
Yeah, I think so. I'm interested to
I'm
know
with you.
if any of them resonated with you.
We're in unanimous agreement on that.
I think between the three of us, we can agree that the 3 is the best.
I think 3 is the most valued in our culture. I think America has a 3 culture. And so
Definitely.
I think 3s just get propped up like, oh, you're deceitful or you've been the truth. Yeah, but you're really productive. You really help our company. And so I think 3s get a little bit of a pass and are really, they tend to be the homecoming kings and queens, the, great team leaders. They're oftentimes admired and get the employee of the year. They're just productive, efficient, and so just highly valued in our culture.
Is that because, certainly there's cultures that don't value 3, maybe they value others higher.
I think there's lots of people we know that don't value 3s.
Yeah, losers. Is that because, like a lot of times when people say, oh, well, our culture values this, it's almost like a negative lens. I'm not saying that that's what you necessarily meant by that. But a lot of times it's like, oh, well, we're so wrong for valuing work ethic. Right. And that's usually people who are not 3s that are saying that we're wrong as a country to do that. But is that because, oh, well, we just happen to, or, our unique history caused us to that? Or is it the case that more often than not, a culture is going to value leaders? A group of people is going to say, well, the leaders are the guys at the top, I guess they're going to be the ones that are the most valuable for us. So if you're like them, that's good.
But I think when we look at electing leaders, we elect people with competence, who work hard, who are diligent, who want to lead, who speak a lot and have those characteristics. And sort of it's a self-fulfilling situation there, don't you think?
I don't know if is there an example of a country that doesn't, or a culture that doesn't value 3s, or maybe values another?
Yeah, well, I think, Latin America, South America has a very 7 culture, very friendly, joyful. They don't care as much about being on time, like a 3 would. A 3,
Okay.
That's going to hurt efficiency and productivity. So
Yeah.
7, it's much more of a, like even Mexico, even, you go south, there's much more hospitality, less of a concern for being on time, productivity. It's more family based. You know what I'm saying? And you could go to Asia, and it's a very loyal culture, a very 6-like culture where you submit to authority. You're loyal to your family and friends. Family comes before career. Oftentimes in America, careers are valued over family. Like you can sacrifice your time with your kids in order to get ahead.
Mm-hmm.
So, you can go almost continent by continent and start to see
So
some
there
themes here. That
are places where organically a culture develops and has a robust history and success and vibrant culture, and they just didn't get there with the 3s leading the way.
I wonder why that developed, because I never thought about that before, but
Obviously,
I think you're right.
Obviously, we're a little biased. We're like, how could you be successful without the 3s? How could you be successful without the achievement and the leadership? I mean,
right. And I think those other cultures are probably equally annoyed.
Oh, for sure.
By cultures that are less hospitable or less family oriented, or less driven to follow the crowd, or whatever it is. I'm sure they look at us and go, how do they survive in a situation like that? That's interesting. I never thought about it that way. When going back to a 3, because I am a 3, you talked about deception. And I think the risk that I find is that a lot of times in decision making, I will have self-deception. I have to fight against that. Sanger probably has that too, but just doesn't. He deceives himself and doesn't realize he does.
Just not aware of it.
Just not aware of it. But I think when, that's a big thing to overcome when we talk about decision making, is that I've got to make sure that I'm not over assessing my competence or avoiding things I should be listening to. Shutting things off, I think, is probably equally risky.
Yeah. The tip that I give for 3s is don't let your need for speed and efficiency keep you from listening to others and doing proper risk assessment. 3s are like airplanes. We like to go fast. We like to go over people. We don't like when people are slowing us down. So I'm married to a 6, and so she's the most risk assessment prone kind of
Mhm.
personality. And so she's always pointing out, hey, what this could go wrong. This could go wrong. And one example is I got stranded on the side of the interstate once driving her car because she kept telling me, hey, it's time for an oil change. You got to take it in. And I was working, I'm always working. And I was like, I don't have time to do that. And then took it and then ended up on the side of the interstate with the engine smoking. And that's just a great example of how threes, if we don't slow down and listen and do risk assessment, even though it feels like we're not going to get ahead and we're going to sink and we're not going to achieve results, we got to slow down. We got to listen. We got to do proper risk assessment in the decision-making process, and got to listen to my wife, listen to those sixes if we're going to actually be productive and not have blowups and breakups, in our life.
What caused you or motivated you to do what you're doing? I think what you're doing, Tyler, is very unique. I've heard of the Enneagram all the time, right? I feel like Enneagram enthusiasts are almost like vegans. Like they're going to tell you about it before you ask. I had not taken this assessment until we got connected with you, but I was always told what I was. I was told that I was a 3, by my cousin who was like super into it. And she was always telling me, well, you're this way because of this and that. And these are your numbers and your wings or whatever that was. So I'm like, oh, okay.
That goes against my Enneagram ethics, to tell people what they are.
She's all over the place.
It's supposed to be a self-validating tool. Like you're supposed to go through it. Sometimes tests are inaccurate. So I created a self-typing guide so that people could walk through it and then say, yeah, this is the one I resonate with the most, rather than having somebody tell you what you are.
Yeah, it's very, very helpful, right? To kind of go, okay, well, I haven't been assigned something. Like for me, I did, a kind of assessment, and then I got like 3 or 4 ones that were all at the top. They were all tied up as far as percentages on the assessment, that it still said, well, hey, you're probably a 3. Well, I don't know. I don't know. Am I like, are we sure? All the other ones are even scores, but I had never met anyone or heard of anyone that's doing this specifically to tailor the message of the gospel based on Enneagram.
I find it very fulfilling, both in the church world and not in the church world. So more recently, I've been doing trainings in the business world and just love seeing the aha moments and love seeing the light bulbs kick on and being able to facilitate, greater empathy. So for example, one of the girls came out as a type 2. When you talk about the Enneagram, you're talking about probabilities, not absolutes. And so you can't say, oh, I typed as a 3, which means I'm automatically deceitful or automatically this or automatically that. That's absolutes. That's putting yourself in a box. The Enneagram says, if you're a type 3, here are some probabilities that you need to look at that may or may not be true. And so one of the, there's a high probability if you're a 3 that you're going to struggle with how you look in your image. And so pay attention to that. Pay attention to that. And that works in the church world and it works in the business world. And so when I hear people are a type 2 or type 3 or whatever, I can instantly think of some things that would be helpful to pay attention to. And for like twos are the most interpersonal personality type, and they oftentimes pursue others. They're like, how can I meet your needs? They're empathetic, and they pursue other people, but oftentimes they're the first to initiate, and other people don't reciprocate very well. And so, just knowing she's a 2, I said to the rest of the team, hey, she's probably the one that sends out the text messages that asks you to go out to eat, grab lunch. She would love it if you pursued her and you took the initiative to pursue her, because she's highly relational. A good day for me is accomplishing things off my tasks and accomplishing my goals. That's what a good day feels like. People meetings oftentimes feel like an interruption to me achieving. But for twos, if they don't, unless they have meaningful interactions with people throughout the day, it wasn't a productive day. And so just encouraging the team, hey, pay attention. Remember that she's a human being, not a human doing. So pursue her, take her out for lunch. She would feel very loved. And, she's almost crying. She's like, yes, that's what I want. And so those are the types of conversations that, we have even in the business settings that I've been in recently. And I just love it. I just feel like light bulbs turn on and people see each other in a new light and are continue to talk about it for months after the training.
So are you focused mostly on how to help church organizations use this within their organization, or you're tailoring the gospel to the individual based on their personality type?
Both. But the substantial part of my work has been writing books. And so I'm coming out with my 6th book next month, which would be November 2022. And that's specifically for type 2s. And so I've written a 180 page book for every Enneagram type. And so it's a 40-day devotional. And so that's geared towards the faith community. But in the book, I say, here's where your strengths and your desires are affirmed by God, and here's where you need to be challenged. Here's where the gospel challenges your core sin and all these things. And so I take people on a 40-day journey, and I pull from 20 different Enneagram sources that are both Christian and non-Christian, and pull from 20 of the leading resources out there, and then just apply God's word to affirm and challenge over the course of 40 days. And that's just what I love. I love that it can be very contextualized. Again, not just a fluffy devotional that's sitting on a shelf at Barnes & Noble that just, may resonate with everybody a little bit.
Yeah.
But to be very strategic and get very specific and to say, here's how you need to be affirmed and challenged with your image issues. And so I love being able to be very concrete and very specific and helping people. And so I'm working my way through all 9 books, and I've got 6 done now. But I'm also starting to do more work outside of the church world with like business teams, like I said. So a little bit of both.
Yeah. I think that it's great what you're doing with the church. I mean, I think it's great that you're broadening it to tailor the gospel based on the Enneagram. To me, it was really, really cool. It kind of made me think, why is this not already being done 10 times over? It's not uncommon at all for people to have an experience growing up in the church and feel like this is just speaking a different language for me. They're going to a church that maybe their parents picked because it unknowingly spoke to their Enneagram type, and the church leadership spoke to the 7. It's a fun church and they're partying all the time, like the one you were talking about earlier, and little kids of 3 going, why is everyone playing around in youth group? I don't like this.
Yeah.
That was my experience in youth group a lot. Was we're playing games a lot. I'm not really that fun. And, I think it's a great thing to say, hey, this is how you can focus on your unique struggles and your unique strengths. So I love that.
Yeah, I want to write a book someday for pastors on how their personality can make or break their ministry, because they have a lot of power to influence a culture. And so, like I said, sometimes the church is too fun. Sometimes the church is too serious. Sometimes the mega churches in particular, can get too practical and pragmatic, and doing too many practical things, that there's not a focus on the becoming whole and therapy and counseling and working on some of those deeper issues that oftentimes 4s can bring to the table. And so I think we can use the Enneagram as a way to see how can we become more, what are we missing? How can we become more comprehensive and whole? And if that makes sense.
When we think about decision making, I think our tendencies, particularly on some of these types, like a 3, is to make decisions for groups based on what you feel like is best. And sometimes that's the right way to go. But I think the risk is that the decisions are made absent really getting information from what the rest of the group might want, or what the constituency might want. So you end up making suboptimal decisions, even though it's what you thought was best based on how you see the world. Do you find that each of these 9 types struggle with decision-making frameworks differently?
Oh, of course. So for the 1, for example, their decision-making lens is this a good or bad decision? Meaning, like, is it a moral or immoral decision? Is it ethical or unethical? Is it right or wrong? So they tend to be more black and white, and they care about getting it right. And so a decision is bad unless you can get it perfect. And as we know, like I'm working with the type 1 right now on a lease agreement for another building on our property, and ones can get so caught up on doing it right and making sure that everything is perfect that it just slows down the process, and you can never get it completed. So talking about overdone strengths, that goal to make it right and perfect and thorough can actually be a bad decision if it slows down the team and doesn't get them to the goal or doesn't actually get it accomplished.
What is the key component in your mind in understanding the Enneagram and how it impacts decision making? Like I feel like a lot of people that I know, they understand the Enneagram. Oh, this is what I do. This is what I do. This is my strength. Um, how can we take that next step and go, okay, and now on decision making in the choices that I'm making in my everyday life, this is what I need to know about my Enneagram type strengths, weaknesses, etc., to really be able to apply it to a decision making framework that works.
Yeah, they could just take the things that I said before, the core fears, the core desires, and then just work them out in how they might play out in decision making. So for twos, for example, they have that desire to be loved and wanted, and oftentimes they're the biggest people pleasers on the Enneagram,
Yeah.
and it won't say anything negative, because if I say something negative or give hard truth, then they're going to reject me. So I got to be nice. I can be the nice girl, the nice boy, and not say anything. But as you guys know, that can lead to some really bad decisions if what you really want is people's approval and affirmation and can't let anybody down. That's gonna
Yeah.
make you stand in the way of making hard decisions and firing people when it's hurting the team. And so that's an example of how that core desire to be liked can actually lead to bad decisions or not making hard decisions.
Yeah. The struggle I think that a lot of people have is, avoiding or pursuing unknowingly what their natural personality type or Enneagram type will pursue, and not seeing the consequence of that. Right. So I'm going to people please because I'm naturally going to people please. And then I realize later on down the road that I've sacrificed my own wants and desires by not voicing my opinion because I wanted to keep the peace. Or like threes will pursue image and achievement, and then later on down the road realize, oh man, I really neglected the relationships that are important to me because I was focused on my own my own wins. In the decision making, in the front end of that, right? If we can be more aware of those the pitfalls that we might uniquely find ourselves in, what's the next step to making better choices? Because a lot of times I think people will go, oh, well, I'm a people pleaser. And I know that sometimes that might mean that I, don't voice my concerns enough. So I'm just going to start voicing my concerns. I'm going to start being the opposite of myself. And that's not good either, right? We can't just say, oh, well, my Enneagram type is all negative, and so now I'm going to be the opposite of myself. But we also can't just completely embrace with no fear of the negative consequences or pitfalls either.
Yeah, I think I see what you're saying. I try to lead out with affirmation and encouragement, by the way, in the books that I write. And I think that's really important, is starting with a place of affirmation, because how we're wired, how we're created is beautiful. It's special. It's unique. We are needed by the people in our lives. And so there's just a lot to affirm. And I think the Enneagram helps with that. I think the Enneagram also helps build teams being more interdependent. It helps show your need for other people. So, for example, like the fives, their decision making lens is logic and rationality. So, what does the facts say? That's all I trust. I don't trust feelings because they can be wishy washy, and you can use emotions to manipulate people. So, what do the facts say? And they tend to make decisions based on like what's the most logical way to go about this? What's the most rational decision? But then when they're unhealthy, they can neglect people's feelings altogether, not take feelings into account, thinking of ourselves as like thinking heads on a stick rather than actually emotional feeling creatures, that aren't robots. And so if a 5 just knows that I usually come at things from a very logical, rational perspective, I might pull this friend or this coworker or this family member to help me to add feelings to my decision-making process, to know that feelings do matter. And, and if people are upset or people are hurt like that, they might leave your team. They might leave the organization. Like that's not rational to not take those things into consideration. And so I think the Enneagram just helps you to pull people in to say, help me see it. Help me to see things through your lens.
And that's what we should all be doing, right? Is affirming the unique gifts that each other are blessed with, and not doing what is particularly 3s are likely to do and say, hey, well, this is obviously the best. This is obviously the best. And if you're not doing it my way, you're wrong. If you're not motivated by the things I'm motivated for, you're wrong. But I think all types tend to do that. All people have a tendency to say, well, what's important to me, what's natural for me is clearly of higher value than what is natural for you. And if we can affirm each other and say, man, that's something special that you're bringing to the table, Tyler. That's something that you're bringing to the table, Sean. And we love that. I need that because that's not how I am. Then we'll be a lot better off. I think what you're doing is great. Where can people find your new 40-day devotional?
All those books are on Amazon, but you could just find them through my website. The link's there. So gospel for Enneagram.com. So it's gospel FOR Enneagram.com. Or if you just search for my name, Tyler Zach, ZACH, you should be able to find my website.
I knew it wasn't Zach.
It's like
I knew it couldn't be
musician
Zach.
Bach. That's BACH.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, you got it.
I didn't know if it was like a new age, I go by my first and middle name
no
type thing.
Oh, also on Instagram too. That's kind of where the party's at. That's where I put out free content. I like long form content, so not just like quick little slides, but every week I produce a lot of content that I keep compiling from Enneagram resources to put out really valuable content for people that's free. And so they can find me on Instagram, the handle is Gospel for Enneagram. There's about 40,000 followers on there engaging and talking about the Enneagram. And so that's a great place to keep learning as well.
Well, thanks for being here, man. I appreciate it. I learned a lot.
Yeah, I really appreciate you sharing your wisdom with us.
Yeah, I love what you're doing. Keep up the good work.
Thanks, man.
My takeaway from our talk with Tyler is really around taking the fears into consideration. But you have to know what your baseline fears are first. And so it's really around understanding yourself and being able to see what are the downsides to what I might think is a morally righteous position. So in other words, if I tend to be welcoming and inclusive for all people, that's a morally good situation to be in. But if I fail to see what the downside might be in a decision, then I may not make the best decision. So I have to look at myself and be aware enough of what my tendencies are and look at what are the possible failures in decision making. So that's what I took away from our talk.
My takeaway is that every culture or individual with a particular Enneagram type, personality type, tendency is going to be tempted to view others who don't value the same things negatively. And we can see that in the way other countries view our country. We can see that in the way our country views other countries. And I can see that in the way that I judge other people for not living by my standards and doing things my way and choosing to pursue the things that I would pursue or value the things that I would value. And that's not helpful because that doesn't edify them. It doesn't allow those people within my own life to be the best version that they can be. So I think that we could all do a little bit better of encouraging others to live out what their unique strengths are. You just made a great decision to listen to this episode of Decidedly. Make another great decision and leave us a 5-star review wherever you listen to podcasts. We appreciate your support. It helps others find our community and defeat bad decision-making in their own lives. For more daily decision-making insights, check us out at decidedlypodcast.com and on Facebook and Instagram at Decidedly Podcast. Thanks again for listening. I'm Sanger Smith. and this is Decidedly.
Insights, advice, and comments provided by Sean Smith, Sanger Smith, and speakers identified as part of the Decidedly podcast should not be considered recommendations. Speakers not identified as members of Decidedly are expressing their opinion, and their statements should not be construed as reflecting the views of the Decidedly team. This podcast is produced solely for informational purposes, not personalized advice.